Kyren Williams is one of the biggest veteran losers coming out of the NFL draft. We'll tell you just how far he dropped in our Dynasty rankings next.
You are Locked On Dynasty Football, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Here are your hosts, Marcus Mosher and Kate Madjuk.
Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. Today's episode is brought to you by Monopoly Go. I admit it, I have a competitive side, and it is a big fan of Monopoly Go, the mobile hit twist on classic Monopoly. So join your friends and download Monopoly Go, now free on the App Store or Google Play. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. Joining me today, as always, is Kate Madjuk. You can follow her on Twitter at Kate Madjuk. On today's show, we're taking a look at some of the biggest veteran losers coming out of the 2024 NFL Draft. And Kate, we have to start with Kyren Williams.
Yeah, Sean McVay got us good. I think everybody was expecting Sean McVay to go offense at some point. I think everybody thought that in this deep receiver class, we might see Sean McVay dip back into the pool despite having a Cooper Kupp, despite having a Puka.
Sounds like they tried. They tried to trade up for Brock Bowers, and they couldn't get high enough to get him.
Which I think that would have been a much better fit than here with the Las Vegas Raiders. But I digress. We have to talk about Kyren Williams, though, because they selected running back Blake Corum, who is a guy that we've really, really liked. And when we did our player prospect evaluation, we said, like, this is kind of a guy that maybe we like better for his real life football team, for what he brings to an overall offense, as opposed to what he may bring with your dynasty roster. And let's be honest, I think that kind of sticks, right? Like here after the draft, now he's going to be competing for touches with Kyren Williams. And Kyren Williams is a guy that just found his way into the top 5 after a absolutely monstrous performance. Finished as the RB6 overall last year, finished with 20 fantasy points per game, averaged over 3.27 yards after contact per attempt, had a 90.5 PFF rushing grade. Dude dominated. Help me make sense of what this role with Blake Corum is going to be, because I'll admit I was in a bit of a panic. And then I was kind of looking at the percentage of carries last year that Kyren Williams had. He had all of that production, including all of those yards, all of those explosive runs, average 5.1 yards per carry, 12 rushing touchdowns. He did that all with just 55.9% of the team's running back rush attempts, which is lower than I thought it was.
But he played a lot of snaps.
Played a lot of snaps. Yeah.
So I think one of the most interesting things here, Kate, is listening to Sean McVay and Les Snead in their post-draft press conference talk about Blake Corum and Kyren Williams. They basically said, we love Kyren Williams so much that we wanted to go out and draft a running back that was almost identical to Kyren, right? Like, we love his play style, what is interesting here, though, is I understand what they're talking about. They like the shorter running backs that run with a lot of power and then can make really good cuts. But athletically, Blake Corum and Kyren Williams aren't all that similar. If you're watching with us on YouTube right now, you can see that Kyren Williams ran a 4.65 40-yard dash and posted a 3.47 RAS. When you look at Blake Corum, is he a special athlete? No, but he's a very good athlete. 8.29 RAS, 4.53 40-yard dash. The biggest difference is the shuttle stuff. 4.12 shuttle for Blake Corum, 4.33 for Kyren Williams, 6.82 for Blake Corum, and the 3-cone 7.07 for Kyren Williams. Corum is just a better athlete. He's also, I think, the more instinctual runner. I think his feel is better. I think his vision is better. They could talk about how much they love Kyren Williams and all this stuff. But once they get them on the field, like, you're going to notice a difference in athlete, which makes me worry, Kate, that maybe this will be not a 50-50 split, but could it be 70-30?
I think 70-30 feels pretty fair. I don't necessarily think at this point that I'm concerned about Kyren Williams losing the starting role. Like, I think that's
No, no.
firmly in his grasp at this point. But you're right. Like, once you see them on the field side by side doing, even in like OTAs and mini camps, like when you see them doing the same drills, is that going to kind of separate the fact? Now, again, I think like from a standpoint of athleticism, Kyren Williams' play style, I think makes up for some of that lack of athleticism. But Blake Corum has some of that kind of similar element to his game. And I think you're right. Like I think the vision is a bit more instinctual. He's had plenty of reps here in a pro style offense. Like that
Mhm.
translate here fairly well. And like schematically, he might see some more open lanes here. Saw plenty of stacked boxes here in Michigan. We knew he was like kind of carrying this offense, but I think all in all, like it's definitely a hit for Kyren Williams because of how high he climbed in terms of his dynasty value this offseason. I'm still tinkering around with my dynasty rankings though, because I still think he's a top 10 guy for me.
I
Like
agree.
if we're considering a normal backfield, right? I feel like a 70-30 split is pretty
So
normal. Like,
here's where I landed, Kate. I actually didn't move him down in my running back rankings. He's being drafted as RB6 right now. I think that feels right, especially when you consider like the running backs behind him, where like Devin Achan, who I mean the Dolphins traded up to get Jalen Wright. So that scares me a little bit. Saquon Barkley, I have concerns for different reasons, but what I ended up doing is just moving in my overall rankings some receivers higher than him. And I will say the last thing on that I wanted to say on Kyren is usually Sean McVay is pretty good at like once he finds a guy that he really likes, they're going to stick with him and ride it out. However, when it comes to the running back position, he's had a little bit of a wandering eye, right? Like Cam Akers would play really
well,
well for a little bit.
okay, no, no, no. Actually, I'm going to counter this because I do feel like I understand the concern about a wandering eye, but I do think a lot of the quote unquote wandering eye has been perpetuated by injuries. Like they
Yes.
really liked Daryl Henderson. He couldn't stay healthy. And I think he eventually just kind of fell out of favor. If you can't stay on the field, then
But there was
good
even that
riddance.
was it the 2020 yeah, it was the start of the 2023 season, right? It was Darrell Henderson opened the year as a starter, right?
And Cam Akers came in, and then neither of them.
And then
Yeah.
Kyren came in and just it's we'll see.
But I
I
think all the concerns about like what I think they are very much performance based. Like when Sean McVay has had a running back who has stayed on the field like Kyren Williams did, despite the fact that he's a smaller back. When somebody's been productive and like efficient, he hasn't had a wandering eye. Like,
I hope you're right, by the way. I just think this Rams offense, um, they're better when they have Kyren Williams on the field. They are really, really hard to stop. I think if you can rotate Blake Corum in, but not I mean, Kyren Williams can handle a big workload. That I'm not concerned about. I don't want it to be where all of a sudden 1 week it's flipped and now Kyron's the backup and Blake Corum's a starter. I don't think that'll happen, but there's like 5% of me that is concerned that it will happen down the road.
yeah, and there's a part of me that's like almost kind of intrigued to potentially buy a dip on Kyren Williams. We're gonna get a new batch of Dynasty ADP here in probably the next 2 weeks or so, and I think that's gonna be really telling about Kyren Williams. I haven't seen a single Kyren Williams trade go down in any of my leagues. I don't know if you have, but
None, none.
I think people are kind of just curious. Like, I don't know what the value is. And I think probably out of all of the veterans affected by the NFL draft and the selections they made, Kyren Williams is the hardest read for me.
I agree. I'm really curious to see what his ADP looks like for the month of May. We will update you once we get that information. But Kate, let's transition over to Kirk Cousins because the Falcons made one of the most ridiculous picks in recent memory. How does that affect Kirk Cousins' dynasty value? We'll get to that next. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. It's winner take all time in the NBA and in the NHL. And FanDuel is giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 for you to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. I highly suggest go checking out the futures market when it comes to the NBA right now. You can get some really good odds on some long shots like the T-Wolves to come out of the Western Conference, or maybe you think the Celtics are just going to run through the East and win the NBA championship. Check out those future odds as well. Plus, they also have the NFL playoff odds, win total, so much NFL stuff as we get closer to kickoff. So check those out as well. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn and make every playoff shot count with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Are you having to turn down the volume because of all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all that screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or on the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right, Kate, let's talk about Kirk Cousins, who just signed a massive deal, and now he's in a quarterback competition.
Is he in a quarterback competition, though? I think
No.
that's the biggest question. So I'm going to say, again, we keep talking about this trade or this selection here in the draft, and I think about it every day. I think about it before I go to sleep at night. I just can't figure it out. I don't like it, and reports are coming out about just every other team in the league being like, what? Like it doesn't make sense. And I think everybody felt really good when the Falcons signed Kirk Cousins. They pursued him to the point of illegal tampering that is going to cause long-term effects in terms of potential draft capital loss. Like coming off a Achilles injury, obviously a concern, but they just signed him to a 4-year, $180 million contract with $100 million guaranteed. That is
that a good chunk of change?
That is a lot of money. He is 35 years old. And again, coming off of that Achilles injury, I know it's like, it's a concern, but I don't understand what is the end goal here. And looking at, the potential for them to move on from Kirk Cousins financially, I still don't think there is a conceivable way for them to move on, barring another injury from Kirk Cousins here, unless there's an injury, right? And unless there's another injury. And I don't necessarily know that, like, were we investing in Kirk Cousins as a guy who we thought was going to be a quarterback, a cornerstone quarterback on our dynasty rosters for the next 3 years? I don't think so. So, like, I can't tell how much value he loses. It feels like innately he does, because the draft pick seems indicative of the team's feelings. But like, since 2021, like, ranks 9th in passing yards, 6th in passing touchdowns, despite missing all of that time last season. Like Kirk Cousins, he's a good quarterback. He's not a rushing threat, but he is a guy that, like, down for down, he's one of the better pure pocket passers in this league.
So here's my read on the situation. I don't think it changes much for Kirk Cousins' dynasty value, because I think if he's not starting in Atlanta, they'll likely trade him or he'll get cut and he'll move on and he'll start somewhere else. However, this does open up the possibility of some weird things happening. For example, what if it's just clear that he's not quite 100% to open the year? and they just let Michael Penix start the year, right? Like, I think that's probably pretty unrealistic, but it's at least a possibility, right? Maybe they feel like, hey, let's give Kirk the first month of the season to get a little bit healthier, practice, and then we'll put on the field. Or what if it's the flip side? What if the Falcons are nowhere near as good as maybe they think they will be? And for the final 4 or final 6 games of the season, it's Michael Penix starting over Kirk Cousins. What if it's one of these things where Cousins is not quite fitting the offense and they just want to get the young quarterback in there? Like, there are some scenarios out there where I can see Michael Penix playing ahead of a healthy-ish Kirk Cousins, where I guess what? A week and a half ago, that wasn't even in the conversation. So I'm not really moving him down my dynasty rankings at all because he's so low anyways. But I do think he's a more risky option than he was 10 days ago.
Yeah, Kirk Cousins was a guy that throughout the offseason I thought was a great target because, again, not because of that lack of rushing upside and especially coming off a ruptured Achilles, there wasn't a ton of excitement. But I think generally speaking, Kirk Cousins has been one of my favorite QB2s with QB1 upside in Superflex and 2 quarterback leagues. But it makes it a lot more difficult to trade for him. It just, stomaching it yourself. But again, do I think that there are 32 quarterbacks in this league that are better than Kirk Cousins?
No,
No.
of course not. Of course
So
not.
100%, like regardless of what happens with the Atlanta Falcons, I do think Kirk Cousins is playing football somewhere, but like I still can't imagine them moving on in a rapid fashion. I don't think this changes his value overall, but he's still a loser because, like you said, these weren't even conversations that we
No.
were fathoming would be a possibility before the draft.
And there's just now he's part of, I know I was kind of joking that he's part of a quarterback controversy, but I mean, kind of like all
Yeah.
we're going to hear all offseason and during training camp and during the preseason is how's Michael Penix look? How does he look? When is he going to get on the field? Can they get him on special packages? I mean, I think some of that stuff is just nonsense, but that wasn't a conversation we were having about the Falcons backup quarterback 10 days ago. I want to just point that out there. I'll
And
put that out there.
like, let's also put it out there that, like, I'm sorry, what are the Falcons doing in terms of a locker room standpoint? Like, having that kind of situation in your locker room without a clear plan, without a clear hierarchy
Yeah.
is
So
wild.
I want to give you some names that are being drafted around Kirk Cousins in Dynasty, and I want your thoughts. So right now on Dynasty League Football, again, we're going to get a new batch of ADP here in the next week or two. So this is going to change. But Deshaun Watson, QB 19, Kirk Cousins, QB 20.
I hate myself. Probably Deshaun Watson.
JJ McCarthy at QB 21. This one's not close for me.
JJ McCarthy.
Yeah. Bryce Young at QB 22. This one's also not close for me.
I'm gonna roll with Kirk.
See, I would
I
take
can't
Bryce.
wait to eat my words. And
I would take Bryce. Baker Mayfield, fresh off a new contract as well.
I'll take Kirk Cousins.
I'll take Kirk as well. Will Levis, QB 24.
Kirk.
Yeah, I think I agree with you there.
The thing is, like, I mean, Will Levis, I really like. I've been higher on Will Levis than most, but we still don't know what he is, and he could be absolutely nothing.
There
It's
is
kind of
a
like that thing, like, oh, it could be a boat, but it could be nothing, and that's
there's
where
a
Will
good
Levis is
chance.
right now.
Yeah, there's a good chance that Will Levis just isn't a starting quarterback in 2025. Whereas Kirk, like, I
Yeah.
unless he retires, there's no situation where Kirk Cousins isn't starting next year. Like,
Also,
whether
we
it's on
gotta
the
give
Falcons
him
or somewhere else.
credit because, like, man, does he know how to find the bag in like almost
Oh yeah,
every
yeah. He's
like
a pro bag getter.
he
Yeah,
is a pro bag getter, and I'm like so amped for him for that because like dude's robbing the Atlanta Falcons if they want to move on to Michael Penix. He's like,
sure. I'll give me
great,
all that
thanks.
money.
Got my bag. I'm gonna go to the next one. And I just mad respect for Kirk Cousins. But like I think this lands in what? Somewhere around QB 22,
Yep.
QB like right around that range, which again, before this, I think he was kind of the consensus right around QB 18. So not a big flip. But I think you're looking at some of players with similar question marks and you're giving them the edge, especially maybe due to age or a lack of injury concern.
All right, let's talk about the Raiders drafting Brock Bowers and now what happens with Michael Mayer, because I am sick. We will get to that next. This episode is brought to you by Monopoly Go. All right, game off. We got to talk about Monopoly Go. And I know what you're saying. You guys have already talked about that so much before. But I got to tell you, there's just so much good stuff in this game that we haven't gotten to yet. In Monopoly Go, you can team up with friends for time tournaments where you work together to build up each other's boards. The more that you win together, the more awesome prizes that you unlock. And there's so much to get, like unique stickers that you can trade with your friends to complete big albums. You can also, to complete albums that you can get big prizes for. You can also collect these new playing pieces that you can travel the board with. And there's hilarious emojis for taunting your friends that I absolutely love. Plus, Monopoly Go feels new and exciting every single day with constantly changing tournaments and challenges. A ton include their own unique mini games like digging for treasure. And there's always new timed events that help you win big, like massive multipliers for everything you win and rent frenzies. There's always something fun to discover on Monopoly Go. So get off the bench and go download it now for free on Google Play or the App Store. Game on. Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast. On today's show, we are breaking down the biggest veteran losers coming out of the NFL draft. And I'm in this next category because I've been so bullish on Michael Mayer. I've been trading for him in every single league. I've been buying up all of his rookie cards in my house and displaying them all over the place. And now it's like a gut punch, Kate.
Yeah, I mean, you've been busy wallpapering your house with photos of Michael Mayer. And meanwhile, the Raiders are now papering their front office with photos of Brock Bowers. So, like,
Great.
let's get into it and let's talk about what this actually means for Michael Mayer. And we've already talked about the fact that, like, there were about 1 million places Brock Bowers could have landed where his value would have had him as the overall tight end one for Dynasty. Where it hits, like, he probably gonna fall right around like tight end 6. But like Michael Mayer was this massive value coming out of his rookie season. I mean, didn't like blow anything off the page, 10.9 yards per reception, 1.08 yards per route run. His season high came in week 6, caught 5 of 6 targets, 75 receiving yards. Like, nothing popped off the page for Michael Mayer. But what you know about him is that he came out as one of the most well-rounded tight end prospects in this class. He had round 2 draft capital, which you love to see.
The Raiders traded up for him.
Raiders traded, like, he was a part of that future plan. And one of these guys that I was like kind of preaching patience for, because he is a well-rounded asset that can play more of the traditional inline tight end role as opposed to like a Sam Laporta who's playing more of a slot role, right? Like, I come out of this and my main question is, like, how are the Raiders going to use these two? Because I have to imagine they're going to use a lot of 2 tight end sets, which kind of goes with their philosophy, right? They want to run the ball. They want to be this smash math style football that's going to play in well for them. But Michael Mayer, is he going to be relegated to more of that blocking role as opposed to Brock Bowers, who's going to be running the routes? Is there a world where these two can coexist and both hold fantasy value? Maybe not with Aiden O'Connell or Gardner Minshew at quarterback,
No.
but like, is there any world where this isn't as bad as it seems?
No, it's going to be bad. I mean, because if it was just Brock Bowers and Michael Mayer on this offense, I think there's a world where you could talk yourself into it. But they also have Devontae Adams, who's going to gobble up like 170 targets, right?
I hear that
Jacoby
guy's
Myers,
good.
yeah, and Jacoby Myers is actually a pretty good NFL receiver. Now, he's not somebody that's all that interesting from fantasy, but he's good enough to earn 7 or 8 targets every single week. Like, he's been that player for a while now. My guess is what happens is Brock Bowers ends up being the slot tight end, the guy that they put in motion, the guy that they get the ball to. And Mayer ends up basically becoming the Dawson Knox to a Dalton Kincaid. We've only seen really one situation where having two tight ends on the field worked, and that was Rob Gronkowski and Aaron Hernandez with Tom Brady throwing them the football. It's not quite the same with Gardner Minshew and the Las Vegas Raiders and Luke Getsy running the offense. So this sucks. I hate it. I hate everything about it because I think Michael Mayer on the right team could be a top 10, top 8. I'll stop myself there. Top 8 dynasty tight end. And it's not going to happen with Las Vegas now. Man, my hope is that maybe somebody comes and rescues Michael Mayer and they trade a 2nd-round pick for him. But I think more likely than not, it's just going to be Michael Mayer's 450 yards, 4 touchdowns. And we always wonder what could have been.
That's such a bummer. And looking at their usage last year, obviously Brock Bowers' usage came in Georgia's offense, and Michael Mayer's usage came in the Raiders offense. But I looked up sort of like their overall percentage and what percentage of their snaps, hands down across the board, Michael Mayer devoted more of his time to situations that are not as conducive to fantasy scoring. A higher percentage of his snaps came as a blocker. A higher percentage of his snaps came in the true inline position. 59.6% of his snaps came from the inline position, as opposed to Brock Bowers, 38.8. Brock Bowers played a lot more out of the slot, which I think just kind of speaks to the prototype for usage here. Bowers ran a higher route percentage on passing downs than Michael Mayer. I think their usage in the last season, albeit in 2 respective offenses, kind of gives us probably a good idea of the way they're going to be used in the season to come.
I hate it. I spent so many draft picks going up inquiring Michael Mayer. I thought he'd be a really good fit in this offense. He could basically be Cole Kmet 2.0, and it's not going to happen. And it's got to be frustrating for Mayer because he's one of the most productive tight ends in college football history. He was a 21-year-old draft pick, and then he played well before he got hurt and missed some time. And now he's going to be blocked by the guy that was better than him in college as well, who was the John Mackey Award winner. So really frustrating situation. I wanted to say that we had Michael Mayer was being drafted as like tight end 18, tight end 19, and we were gobbling him up at that rate. Like that was just, we thought he was well underpriced. Now we find out why.
Yeah. The Raiders got us good. They got us real good.
I'm so depressed. All right. That is it for today's show. What a way to end the show and end the week. But that's how we do it here. Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast. Go check us out on YouTube. Go download the podcast wherever you get your podcasts. We are free and available on all platforms. Follow Kate on Twitter at Kate Majuk. I'm at Marcus _Mosier. Enjoy your weekend, and we will see you right back here on Monday.